peace, freedom, prosperity. I just think it sounds better. The other thing is, since I view the three as an interlocked triad, unless you have a condition of peace, if you have a garrison state, a Cold War mentality, you will not have freedom. You can't have freedom in a state that is in a preparation, a state of alert or preparation for war. I think that to put one before the other really doesn't work, and I think that's an error that many libertarians commit, saying that you can have freedom regardless of what else is going on. It's like a three-legged stool or a tripod. They're very interlocked, and you can't have one without the other. It's like the three rings on a Ballantine ale bottle. You pull one out and the other two fall apart. So I don't really agree that the freedom is more important than the peace or the prosperity. I think they all tie together. Probably the prosperity results more from the peace and the freedom, and in that sense should come last. But I just think in terms of a positioning statement that the way it is more memorable. Yes, the other gentleman in the back there. Yes, this is the marketing research I referred to earlier in response to Craig Franklin's question. But I will say this, that's a legitimate point, and I will answer it as follows. Generally speaking, that phenomena is not going to occur in that just because High Times readers, quote, druggies or whatever, are less civic than other people and don't want to get involved, there's probably going to be a roughly proportional contribution, because intensity of devotion to a cause is going to show up both in terms of voter turnout and willingness to contribute to promoting their goals. The two most fanatical groups that I've run into over the years in this great coalition of repeal groups, as I like to call it, are the gun enthusiasts and the motorcycle people who are violently opposed to helmet laws. You can get 2,000 bikers to come out to a protest against helmet laws. And I admit that's probably not one of the 10 greatest encroachments on our freedom that the state has come up with. But boy, does it arouse people's passions. The problem with the bikers is they don't have any money, and they don't vote. So even if you had a helmet law, I didn't put one in there because you could do one, and all the bikers, as they look at it, would go, "Wow, man, that's really righteous." Are you going to vote for Clark Hunter? "Oh, no, man, I'm not registered. I'm a nomad. I drift around, Can you contribute to the campaign?" "Oh, man, I haven't got any money. I spend it all on, a new tire for my bike." So there is a correlation there. I think that the areas where you're going to get the greatest contributions are going to be from the areas where there's the greatest, at least concern, if not breadth of intensity, and that the thing pretty much works out. Yes, this gentleman.
I want to object to your characterization of motorcycles.
That was meant to be a humorous interlude. I was just pointing out to him that people who don't vote tend to be people who don't contribute to political campaigns either. The hierarchy is such that you're more likely to vote than you are to contribute to political campaigns. 50% roughly of the adult population votes. Something like 3 or 4% contributes to political campaigns. So if you've got an area where people don't care enough about an issue to vote, they certainly don't care enough about that issue to contribute to publishing an ad promoting that cause.
One thing that I personally would be willing to contribute to would be running an ad in a magazine like Road Rider.
Mm-hmm. No, Easy Riders and Road Rider are two very different publications.
Are you familiar with Road Rider as a publication?
Vaguely. I mean, just from the point of view of I keep a tab on media in general.
They run a column every month called, something that is bureaucrat. And they give a whole page of what bureaucrat is up to. And they're very anti-DOT and National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, all of that. He's very much...
Motorcyclists and sports car enthusiasts and people like that are the car magazines are very much the same way. You can read the columns and the letters in Car and Driver or whatever. And an ad like that actually could carry that message. In fact, would probably mention helmet laws as an example.
Yeah, that would be excellent.
Yes.
Why is it why is it that very highly specialized motorcycle groups, sports car enthusiasts, gun enthusiasts, why is there that correlation with the fanatic individualist thing? I can see it with the gun control, but why sports car enthusiasts? Why motorcycle? Of all the things that helmet law is obviously not critical.
I can't hear you very well. Can you speak a little more loudly or clearly?
Right.
Okay.
The question is, why is it that these esoteric publications and people with like hobbies and interests do generate that kind of intense enthusiasm for individual, their individual rights, be it something as concrete as helmet law?
Because you're hitting them where they live. The question, for those of you who didn't hear it, was why is it that some of the strongest support for individual rights comes from motorcycle enthusiasts, sports car enthusiasts, etc.? Well, there's really two aspects to that. One, it kind of doesn't. A lot of sports car enthusiasts may be very, very interested in repealing the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, and they're against gasoline rationing, but they're not really gung-ho on individual rights per se across the board. And the reason that the enthusiasm is generated, of course, is that you're hitting the people where they live, you're goring their ox. People, by and large, again, as I pointed out, people do not really, most Americans are not ideologically motivated. We do not have a tradition of ideologically based political parties in this country to anywhere near the extent that, say, the European countries do. They're not interested in any new political sectarianism. They're not looking for, a new political solution or a new political system. They're just looking for a way to make the government stop making them wear helmets or let them take vitamins or smoke dope or whatever. To that extent, the coalition approach has a problem in that all these people aren't necessarily hardcore. But hopefully, as we draw them in, we can educate them. And I have witnessed again and again and again people who were brought into contact with the libertarian movement because they were concerned about the government, because a police state is the only, in a police state only police have guns, or because of the speed limit, or because of helmet laws, or drug laws, or X or Y or Z, that they're brought in and they see that it does tie together. And we're saying, we're asking you on the surface level, and we're working on this on two different levels. We're appealing to the voters, saying, everybody who's pissed off at the government, vote Libertarian. And that'll send them a message, and maybe they'll back off. That's the superficial level. At a deeper level, the people who care enough to investigate it any further come in and we say, don't you think, and I've converted a number of conservatives on this, you're going around saying people should be free to take Laetrile if they want to, but you don't think they should be free to take marijuana if they want to. Don't you think that's a little inconsistent? And they'll go, well, but marijuana is bad for you. And I go, yeah, well, that's what people say about Laetrile too. Doesn't each person have the right to decide for themselves? Can you realistically say you're against fluoridation in the water and turn around and take a prohibitionist approach on marijuana laws? Most people that are interested enough to look into a political philosophy or a political movement in any depth, and by any depth I mean beyond simply going into the voting booth and pulling the lever that says Libertarian. Most people that are interested above and beyond that level are inquisitive enough and intelligent enough and possess enough curiosity and mental integrity that they respond. They come in and they listen and they're skeptical at first. You've all seen it happen. And they'll pick up the books, or somebody will give them a book and say, you ought to read this. And they read Rothbard and Nozick and Hospers and Friedman and the whole litany, and they come out of it realizing, yeah, if I want to be free, everybody's got to be free. I can't be in favor of saying, I get to drink alcohol, but you don't get to smoke dope, or, I get to own this, but you don't get to own gold, or whatever. The process works on both levels, and this is aimed primarily at the mass communication aspect of reaching people and persuading them that for whatever reason you ought to vote Libertarian, for your reason, not because you agree with everything else, but for your reason you ought to vote Libertarian. It's a way to achieve the immediate political goal that you want. Yeah.
Dave, I have two questions. One sort of a minor one. I thought that the repetition and recognition thing is important. I see your logo there, and I'm wondering if it's going to be any sort of effort to keep it up over the next few years, or if it's going to go throughout the entire party literature. Because I have a
am proposing, as maybe some of you recollect, the title of this thing was Marketing and Communications Approach for the 1980s. I don't see this as being directly the presidential campaign thing. I'm talking about a marketing and communication program for the party, not only for the year 1980, but beyond. I have argued for years that it's very important to have a consistent style and a consistent, both visually and in terms of the positions we take, running throughout all of our material, from recruiting brochures to advertising to position papers, whatever. And I am proposing, and I may get shot down in flames when we set up a marketing and communications committee. Maybe people won't like the idea of peace, prosperity, and freedom as the theme, or maybe they don't like the Statue of Liberty or whatever. This is the concept approach, concept development only. Any of you, incidentally, that feel that this approach has merits, mention it to people that are on or are likely to be on the national committee and tell them that. Give them a little bit of grassroots feedback.
Okay, Jason, the other thing I was really important is we talked about the coalition of the field, which is considered to be political. And I understand that you see the effectiveness of the approach when you're dealing with a lot of different groups. But I'm curious, what about the positive aspects? We're talking negatively. Could you, for example, take the magazine, science fiction magazine analog and say, for civilization, okay, to make it a positive thing. You take a woman's day magazine and say, a child can be all they can possibly be. That sort of thing. Isn't it fair to try a possible?
That's a very interesting question, very interesting observation. I will only give you the observation that survey after survey after survey on voting patterns over the years throughout the United States and in some other countries has shown consistently that by an overwhelming margin more people vote against than vote for. But Lyndon Johnson didn't win. Barry Goldwater lost. Richard Nixon didn't win. George McGovern lost. Most of the people that went out there and voted on those elections, they didn't go, boy, I'm going to go out and vote for Richard Nixon because he's neat. N-O. Or as John Belushi would say, but no. They went in there and go, that goddamn McGovern, if he gets in, we're all going to be dead and or broke. I got to vote for Nixon. That kind of approach. And the same thing with Goldwater. People, and I think from our point of view, everybody goes, it's so terrible to be negative. No, it really isn't terrible to be negative when you're being negative about bad things. The government, as I said, people are coming to realize in a real and fundamental sense that the government is their enemy. There is a very broad, widespread, sort of vague, incoherent, unarticulated distrust of government. We are the ones who can and should be making that coherent and articulate and saying, yes, government, the state is your enemy for the following reasons, and here's what you can do about it. So the idea of let's talk about a better tomorrow and all that. Neil Smith who's a friend of mine from Colorado. Some of you may have talked to or heard him talk. He's a big exponent of utopianism. And I agree that has to be part of it. But in a mass communications program, I think you have to hit on the issues, as I said, things that people can relate to directly. They'll go, yeah, I'm tired of being regulated. Yeah, I'm tired of being taxed. I'm tired of being, drafted and sent off to war. I'm tired of being told what I can smoke and drink and read and, who I can do what with. Why don't you guys just all go away and get off my back? That sentiment is out there. On a political level, this is what we must direct our communications to. On a deeper philosophical level, yes, of course, we have to stress the positive, and we have to educate people towards consistency. But on a mass communications, mass marketing level, we're trying to create and solidify and strengthen that coalition of repeal groups in the voting arena. Yes, this gentleman here in the second row.
I saw some comment on it that the symbol of the party was a porcupine. How did this time the earth?
Whatever happened to the porcupine?
Okay, there has been an ongoing debate for 8 years now, folks, 8 years, count them, on what should we have as a party symbol. I have maintained from the beginning that to me, as an advertising and communications professional, the most important thing was that we have a symbol, one symbol, and stick to it. There has never been any agreement. I am perfectly willing to take any symbol that our party wants to come up with and develop an identity program around it. I've dropped that in because in terms of the mass communications effort, more people, I think, relate on an immediate visual glance level to the Statue of Liberty as a symbol, or you could use the Liberty Bell, as a symbol of individual freedom and throwing off an oppressive government and so forth than they do to the bar and arrow, or though they do to the porcupine. As I see it, the trend more and more has been that sort of libertarians in their own little groups as a sort of, password, like the early Christians used the little outline of the fish. They use the little liber sign emblem, but it doesn't really work for mass communications outreach approach. And I think that something like the Statue of Liberty or the Liberty Bell is probably best for that particular application. Stormy, you had a question.
Can we go back to one strike?
Oh, well, I go back to one strike.
Because in my area, baseball is really big, and their only political interest is whether the city's going to make more baseball diamonds. So it seems to me that a lot of the libertarian approach is toward people that haven't voted before or haven't had much of an interest since Nixon or whatever, and something like that, if it can be worked in to grab the eye of the person that has some broad interest like that doesn't have anything to do with politics, and then following that up with not too many words. Because once they've caught one strike, maybe it's something about baseball, they start reading, they weren't going to go very far. But it was that idea that you can incorporate things that don't have much to do with politics, government, any of that, to at least get their attention in talking about something like Newsweek or Time. Then...
Is this a question, Stormy, or an exposition?
Well, it's just a comment that struck in my mind. And I also very much agree with you on that visual thing, that there has to be something on a continuing basis. And finally, I just want to say that a whole program like this would really help on a local level. It gives it a lot more credibility when I go out locally if they've seen something about the Libertarian Party in Time or Newsweek.
Right.
It ties it all in.
Right. Absolutely. And I'm talking again about promoting primarily the party, although these things would be available for individual candidates that wanted to use them. I want to back up to another one, as a matter of fact, because there's something that I forgot to mention. I may be wrong on this, but I think there is, due to a sort of fluke in time, that there is a lot of public sympathy to be generated, or some kind of gestalt thing we can do in the next year by heavily hammering away at the theme of the empire. And the reason I say this is, as those of you who are tuned into such obscurity may already know, in May of 1980, there will be released with something like a $12 quadrillion advertising budget behind it, the second Star Wars movie, which will be called The Empire Strikes Back. And the whole thing is the evil empire trying to control. I think if we try to create an identity in the public's mind, a spillover, coattail on this, the U.S. government is the empire in the here and now world. Darth Vader lives in Washington, D.C., right. In fact, that might not make a bad bumper sticker sniffing if Darth Vader is alive and well and living in Washington, D.C., And let them in their own minds plug in their own favorite villain. Is it Eddie Kennedy? Is it Henry Kissinger? Is it Jimmy Carter? But I think that thought is one that we can capitalize on, and we all ought to be out there handing out literature as people come out. People are going to be standing in line at that movie, just like they were at the first one. And when you're standing in line at a movie, you haven't got a whole lot to do, and if somebody comes along and hands you a brochure, you'll probably read it. And I think this is the kind of approach, in terms of capitalizing on public awareness and public sentiment, be fools not to take advantage of. Yes?
Would it be feasible in local campaigns to have an ad about a local issue which piggybacks on that format?
Absolutely. If you have the resources and wherewithal, to just pick up the logo and use the same type style in the headline, yes, it makes a great deal of sense. And once we get the initial package developed, my idea would be that we would then seek suggestions for further ads in the series, like we've got the basic package of 6 or 8 or 12 or whatever, and say, people out there, what do you want? What do you feel would be valuable additions to this basic pack, which covers the major national issues? And maybe we could develop, through the National Advertising Marketing Communications Committee, develop further ads that might meet local requirements. But even if that weren't done on the national level, it would be a very good idea for the state and local organizations to pick up on it and run with it. Yes, you, sir.
I wonder what your thoughts are on the column when you're selling the state is the enemy, or your enemy. When that crosses over with the average American's sort of patriotism and his ability to sort of go all soft on the 4th of July.
Right. I I was out at Disneyland last night, even I thought that the float with the eagle and the flag and all was just wonderful, you know.
So when you say, when you really attack Washington in this way, I mean, it is a difficult sort of problem.
I think it's a very good point. I'm glad you raised it. Murray and I had a rather spirited debate on that subject in the Libertarian Forum about 2 years ago. Some of you may remember Murray ran an article called "Do You Hate the State?" in which he said that the key litmus test as to whether somebody was, a good person or a bad person was whether they hated the state. And I wrote back and said, no, it wasn't. The key question was, did they love liberty? And you can take either side of that debate, obviously. I think it is very important for us, as I said in my reply to Murray, to constantly differentiate between America, the land, America, the people, and the state, the apparatus of institutionalized force. We cannot afford to acquire an unpatriotic image in the sense of being anti-American, which is why, where is it? One of these ads, like I said, the visual really doesn't work. I think that there is a problem with that visual in conjunction with that headline. I think the headline is good. I think that visual raises in people's minds some of the problems you just addressed, which is why it would be better to have like an octopus with the Capitol building as the header or whatever. And that's a very valid point. And the answer is we just have to be very careful that we don't make it sound like we're anti-American in the sense of, the good, honest, hard-working, peaceful, freedom-loving people whom we're all for, but that what we're against is this massive monolith with its headquartered, centered in Washington, D.C. that is reaching out and strangling this beautiful land and these good, hard-working, peaceful, freedom-loving people. Yes?
I'd just like to comment on this whole negative positive issue. I really think the logo is terrific. I think if you look at it, it is the most positive thing that has ever come out of the Libertarian Party to use it.
Mm-hmm.
The logo is very positive. It's the thing we're against saying, look at what the monster's doing, or whatever. And here we are proposing a very positive alternative.
Right, exactly.
You can have your life and be happy, or you can take the money.
Exactly. Thank you for pointing that out. Excuse me? Yeah, and I think that in itself helps to offset. That could be, with slight rearrangement, a bumper sticker. You could have the logo and then the words peace, prosperity, freedom, the Libertarian Party. Liberty bells are too round. Yes, Brent.
A couple of comments and then a question. One, for graphic purposes only, now not the way it sounds, but how it would look. What about freedom and prosperity turned around, or does that make it too corny to have sliding off the edge like that? That's, it's a graphic question, strictly.
In just a two-way thing, freedom, prosperity, or reverse the order?
Reverse the order of prosperity and freedom so that they have a natural cadence of dropping down the body there. It's just how it would look. It would sound, because you'd say them separately anyway.
The audio-visual
freedom, prosperity.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, does it look corny when you make them slide like that? Is it better to break two of them so you've got one sticking out slightly, or is there any graphic advantage either way?
Okay,
You can't say no peace, freedom, prosperity. Just don't say any end. It sounds pretty good.
Yeah. Which aren't in the logo there. I gave the words, having decided the order in terms of how these particular ads came out. I came up with the theme, peace, prosperity, freedom, before sitting down with the graphic artist to develop. I simply gave him the words and said, develop a visual approach that implements that. I wouldn't have any doubts that an equally appropriate visual approach could be developed regardless of which order the words were put in.
Another quick comment, I think Stormy mentioned that in the development of these, we need to be real careful to keep the language as it goes around simple, straightforward, and not too much of that in the campaigns and things that we ran in Oklahoma. One of the key factors is how many words you said to get what you meant out.
That's right, and that's...
You don't want to say any more than you have to. And the third question, where can I put my money up? I'm ready.
Well, in all seriousness, if somebody wants to pass a hat and we can start a little fund and I can go into that NATCOM meeting and say we've already got, $200 or something, that might help. I would say just make the checks out to Libertarian Party and, somebody will pass a hat, and then if they don't buy the proposal, then I'll see to it that you get your checks back. Yes, I do, because they would have a tagline saying, for further information or send contributions to. There would be, hopefully we're going to reinstitute the hotline that people can call, the 800 number for information. They're not funds pitching ads per se, but indirectly I believe they would generate money in that they would generate the interest in the contacts, and most people won't fork over money just from reading an ad. They're not designed or intended to, tear out the coupon and mail us $5,000, thank you, see you next year. Yes, sir.
On dealing with bikes, was I looking at a burglar's mask there?
Okay, that's another visual that these things were developed rather hastily. That's supposed to be, if you've ever driven by, I'm sure none of us would ever go inside, but if you've ever driven by one of those streets, they have one in every city where they have all the little X-rated theaters, and then for people that are really kinky, they have the Y-rated theaters, and it's really incredible. And they've got, like the pictures of the people in the little masks, and it's supposed to, be very tantalizing or something. Right. And after I had the layouts done, or the artist that did them for me, and I showed them around to people, several people commented that they thought that visual element was confusing. I agree that it is. There's got to be some other effective yet tasteful way to communicate the idea of smut. Yeah. Excuse me. 4 minutes? Okay, we got 4 minutes. So this will be like our... The Statue of Liberty connotates Republican to you?
They use that all the time. Various conservative groups, Liberty Bell and Statue of Liberty.
Right. And some liberal groups too, like the ACLU, and so we're... There is the problem that a nationally recognized symbol with a built-in connotation like that, such as Liberty Bell or Statue of Liberty, has been used by numerous groups in the past. And it's one reason that it has been used to argue against. There's been a continuing battle between the people who want to go with something that already has a connotation and coming up with something that's uniquely ours. And there's arguments on both sides, which I'm sure you can see. There's a further split in the camp of people who want something that's uniquely ours as to, well, what should it be? Should it be a seagull? Should it be a porcupine? Should it be the Liberty sign? Should it be something else? Again, I'm not wedded to the idea of the Statue of Liberty. I used that in developing this simply as an illustration of how a concept could be developed. Yes, I think we'll have to make this our last one.
It's very important for mass approach that it not be so obtuse like a porcupine.
Right.
Because no one knows what it means. It's just too obtuse, too hidden. Something everyone knows what it is.
Right. I think we just, yes, one more quickie. Yeah, this is just a concept of, that... I think the answer to that is the point that was already raised. The headline does the job of bringing up the negative, talks about the thing that's bugging them, and at the bottom, the continuing reinforcement of the good, that the Libertarian Party is something that not only is against the specific thing that you're thinking about in this ad, but always the idea of Libertarian Party becomes identified in their minds with peace, prosperity, and freedom. I'm afraid we've run out of time. If any of you want to chat a little bit in the outside afterward, I'd be happy to do that with you. Thank you very much. Retrieve my slides, I can see. Yeah, if we get an envelope or something, I can put that in. Somebody got a nice big envelope. $35.